The red warning lights flashed across the control room of New Haven Colony. Jake Morrison looked up from his morning coffee as the alarm sounds filled the small building. He had been the colony administrator for 3 years now, and nothing good ever came from those lights. "What's the problem?" Jake asked Danny Cole, who was standing at the sensor station. Danny served as their security chief, though most days his job involved keeping the mining equipment safe from dust storms. "Something big crashed about 2 miles from the settlement," Danny said, pointing at the screen. "Really big. The sensors are showing a heat signature, but it's fading fast." Jake walked over to look at the data. New Haven Colony sat on the edge of known space, on a planet called Kepler 442b. They had been here for 5 years, mining rare metals and trying to build a life far from Earth's crowded cities. Strange things happen sometimes on frontier worlds, but this looked different. "Could be a ship," Jake said. "Maybe someone needs help. Or maybe it's something we don't want to meet," Danny replied. He had been a soldier before coming to the colony, and he always expected trouble. Dr. Lisa Parker heard the alarms from her lab and came running. She was their xenobiologist, which meant she studied alien life forms. So far, the biggest things she had found on this planet were some 6-legged creatures that looked like purple rabbits. "If it's biological, I need to see it," Lisa said. "This could be the discovery of a lifetime." Jake made the decision quickly. "Danny, get your gear. Lisa, bring your medical kit. We'll take the rover and check it out." The 3 of them drove across the rocky ground toward the crash site. The landscape was mostly red dirt and strange blue plants that grew in twisted shapes. 2 suns hung in the sky, making everything look orange. When they reached the area, they found something that made them all stop and stare. A creature lay on the ground, bigger than anything they had ever seen. It was 8 feet tall and covered in scales that looked like blue crystal. It had 6 legs, all ending in claws that could probably cut through metal. Its head was long and narrow, with 4 eyes that glowed with a faint light. "My God," Lisa whispered. "It's beautiful." The creature was clearly dying. Its breathing was slow and painful. Dark blue blood pooled around several deep wounds on its body. It looked like it had been in a terrible fight. "Stay back," Danny said, raising his weapon. "We don't know what it might do." But the creature seemed to notice them. It lifted its massive head and looked directly at Jake. When it did, Jake felt something strange. The creature wasn't looking at him like he was prey. It was looking at him like it needed help. The creature made a sound, low and musical. Then it did something that surprised them all. Using one of its front legs, it pushed something toward them. It was a metal container, about the size of a large box. Lisa stepped forward carefully. "I think it wants us to take this." "Don't touch it," Danny warned. But Jake was already moving. Something about the creature's behavior told him it wasn't dangerous. At least, not to them. He walked slowly toward the container and picked it up. It was heavier than it looked, and warm to the touch. The creature made the musical sound again, softer this time. Then it did something even more surprising. It reached out with one clawed foot and gently touched Jake's forehead. Where it touched him, Jake felt a warm, tingling sensation. When the creature pulled its foot away, Jake's forehead glowed with a faint blue light for a moment before fading. The creature did the same thing to Lisa and Danny. Each time, the blue glow appeared and then disappeared. Then the creature lay, its head down on the ground, and was still. The glow in its eyes slowly faded until there was nothing. "It's dead," Lisa said quietly. Jake looked down at the container in his hands. There were markings on it that looked like some kind of writing, but not like any language he knew. "We should open it," Lisa said. "Maybe we should take it back to the colony first," Danny suggested. But Jake was curious. The creature had given its life to bring them this container. He found what looked like a release mechanism and pressed it. The container opened with a soft hiss. Inside, nestled in what looked like soft fabric, were two small creatures. They were about the size of house cats, but they looked like tiny versions of the big creature that had just died. Instead of crystal scales, they had soft fur that changed colors in the light. Their eyes were large and bright, and they looked up at the humans with what seemed like trust. "Babies?" Lisa breathed. "It was carrying babies." One of the small creatures made a tiny version of the musical sound they had heard from the adult. The other one tried to climb out of the container, toward Jake. The parent was dying, Jake realized. It brought its children to us. "But why?" Danny asked. "Why would an alien creature trust us with its babies?" Lisa was already thinking like a scientist. "Maybe it could sense something about us. Maybe it knew we would take care of them." Jake looked down at the two small creatures. They were clearly very young and probably couldn't survive on their own. The adult creature had used its last moments of life to bring them to humans. It had even marked the three of them somehow. "We have to take them back to the colony," Jake said. "The council won't like this," Danny warned. "Unknown alien species, possibly dangerous." "They're babies," Lisa said firmly. "Look at them. They need help." As if they understood her words, both small creatures made soft sounds and reached toward the humans with tiny clawed hands. Jake made his decision. "We take them back. We'll figure out the rest later." As they loaded the container into the rover, Jake looked back at the body of the adult creature. Whatever it was, it had trusted them with the most precious thing it had. He wasn't going to let it down. The drive back to New Haven Colony was quiet. In the container beside him, the two small creatures huddled together, making soft musical sounds. Jake had no idea what they were getting themselves into, but he knew there was no going back now. The colony was about to change forever. The colony meeting room had never been so crowded. Word spread fast in a settlement of only 200 people, and everyone wanted to see the alien babies that Jake, Lisa, and Danny had brought back. The two small creatures sat in their container, on the central table, looking around at all the humans with bright, curious eyes. They seemed more interested than afraid, which surprised everyone. "This is a mistake," said Rick Turner, the mining foreman. He was a big man with rough hands and a louder voice. "We don't know anything about these things. They could be dangerous." "They're babies, Rick," said Amy Foster, who taught the colony's children. "Look at them. They're scared and alone." "Today they're babies," Rick shot back. "What happens when they grow up? That adult was the size of a truck. What if these things get that big?" Jake stood at the front of the room, trying to keep order. The Colony Council had 5 members, but really everyone got a say in important decisions. That was how frontier life worked. "Dr. Parker has been studying them," Jake said. "Lisa, tell us what you found." Lisa stood up, holding her tablet. She had been working all morning, running every test she could think of. "They're definitely the same species as the adult," she began. "The genetic markers match. But there are some interesting differences. Their bone density is lower, their muscle development is minimal, and their brain activity suggests high intelligence." "What does that mean in simple terms?" asked Carl Lewis. The colony's chief mechanic. It means they're children and they're smart, Lisa said. Very smart. I've been watching them for 6 hours, and they've already figured out how to open the container from the inside. They also respond to human facial expressions and tone of voice. As if to prove her point, one of the small creatures made a soft, musical sound and reached toward Amy Foster, who was sitting closest to the table. "Can we touch them?" Amy asked. "I don't see why not," Lisa replied. "They seem to want contact." Amy slowly reached out her hand. The small creature gently touched her finger with its tiny clawed hand. The touch was warm and surprisingly gentle. The creature made a happy sound. "Oh," Amy said softly. "Oh, it's so sweet." The other creature was looking at Carl Lewis, who wore a uniform covered in grease stains from working on machines. The creature seemed fascinated by the shiny tools on Carl's belt. "What are we going to feed them?" asked Helen Ross, who managed the colony's food production. Lisa looked worried. "That's a problem. They won't eat any of the synthetic nutrients I offered. They seem to be getting weaker." "What did the adult eat?" Jake asked. "Based on its teeth and claws, probably meat," Lisa said. "But we can't just give them raw meat. They're too young." 8-year-old Tommy Chen had been watching quietly from the back of the room. His parents had brought him because there were no babysitters available when everyone came to the meeting. "Maybe they're sad," Tommy said in his small voice. The adults turned to look at him. "What do you mean, sweetie?" his mother asked. "They lost their mom," Tommy said. "When I'm sad, I don't want to eat either." The room got quiet. Everyone looked at the two small creatures who were huddled together in their container. Amy Foster stood up. "Tommy's right. They just lost their parent. They're probably scared and confused." "So what do we do?" Rick asked, though his voice was softer now. "We take care of them," Amy said firmly, "like we would any children who needed help. The regulations say any unknown alien species should be reported to colonial authority," said Betty Stone, who handled communications with other worlds. "The regulations also say we should use our best judgment in emergency situations," Jake replied. "I'm calling this an emergency." Nina Bell, one of their security officers, raised her hand. "What if they're dangerous when they grow up?" "What if they're not?" Amy countered. "What if they're just children who need a family?" While the adults argued, Tommy Chen slipped away from his parents and walked over to the table. The small creatures looked at him with their large eyes. "Hi," Tommy said quietly. "I'm Tommy. Are you hungry?" One of the creatures made a soft sound and reached toward him. Tommy carefully touched its small hand. "Mom," Tommy called. "They're warm, and they feel sad." His mother, Dr. Sue Chen, came over. She was the colony's medical doctor. "Tommy, be careful." But the creatures seemed to respond to Tommy's presence. They both made happier sounds and tried to climb toward him. "They like children," Lisa observed. "That's actually a good sign. Most predators avoid young humans. Or maybe they see him as easy prey," Rick muttered. "If they wanted to hurt him, they would have already tried," Amy said. "Look at them. They're trying to play." She was right. The creatures were gently batting at Tommy's fingers with their small claws, like kittens, playing with string. "I think we should name them," Tommy announced. "Tommy," his father warned. "The big one with the blue spots can be Storm," Tommy continued, pointing at the slightly larger creature, "and the one with the silver markings can be Echo." As he said the names, both creatures looked at him and made musical sounds almost like they were trying to repeat the words. Did they just... Carl started. They're trying to learn our language, Lisa said excitedly. This is incredible. They're babies, but they're already attempting to communicate. The creature Tommy had called. Storm reached toward Carl's tool belt again. This time, Carl carefully removed a small wrench and held it out. Storm touched it gently, then made a sound that almost sounded like tool. That's impossible, Rick said. No, Lisa said, making notes as fast as she could. It's just very advanced. Some Earth animals can learn human words, but this fast? This is extraordinary. Echo, the smaller creature, was looking at the plants Helen had brought from the greenhouse. It made a sound that was similar to the word Helen had been saying. Grow. The room fell silent as everyone realized what they were. Witnessing. They're not just intelligent, Amy said softly. They're trying to fit in. Jake looked around the room at all the faces. Some were worried, some were amazed, but most were starting to show the same expression Amy wore. Protective care. All in favor of keeping Storm and Echo in the colony while... We figure out what to do, Jake asked. Hands went up around the room. Even Rick raised his hand, though he looked unhappy about it. Motion carried, Jake said. Lisa, you're in charge of their care. Amy, can you help with the social aspects? Of course, Amy said, already reaching toward the creatures. And we all watch out for them, Tommy added seriously. Storm and Echo looked around the room at all the human faces, then snuggled closer together in their container. For the first time since arriving, they seemed relaxed. The colony had just made a decision that would change everything. They had chosen to become a family to 2 alien children, with no idea what that would mean for their future. But as Jake watched Tommy gently pet Storm's soft fur while the creature made happy sounds, he thought they had made the right choice. Sometimes the most important decisions were made with the heart, not the head. 6 months had passed since Storm and Echo arrived at New Haven Colony, and the settlement had become a very different place. The 2 creatures had grown from the size of house cats to the size of large dogs, but their gentle nature around humans had only gotten stronger. Jake Morrison walked through the colony's main street, watching the daily routine that now included 2 alien members. Storm was following Carl Lewis toward the machine shop, carrying a toolbox in its mouth. The creature had developed an amazing ability to understand mechanical problems and could hold tools with its claws in ways that sometimes made repairs easier than human hands could manage. "Morning, Jake," Carl called out. "Storm and I are going to fix the water recycler today. It's been making that grinding noise again." Storm made a musical sound that everyone had learned meant agreement. The creature had picked up dozens of human words and seemed to understand much more than it could say. Near the greenhouse, Echo was working with Helen Ross among the growing plants. The smaller creature had shown an incredible talent for agriculture, somehow knowing which plants needed water and which ones were getting sick before the human sensors could detect problems. "Echo found 3 more diseased plants yesterday," Helen told Jake as he approached. "I swear it can smell problems that our equipment misses." Echo looked up from where it was gently touching a tomato plant with its claws. It made a soft sound and pointed to a section of leaves that looked perfectly healthy to Jake. "It says there's something wrong with that section," Helen translated. She had gotten good at understanding the creature's body language and sounds. "I'll test it this afternoon, but Echo is usually right." The transformation of the colony wasn't just about the work the creatures could do. It was about how they had become part of the community. Children like Tommy Chen treated them like beloved pets, while adults had started thinking of them as helpful neighbors. Dr. Lisa Parker emerged from her lab, looking excited. "Jake, you need to see this," she led, him to her research station, where she had been studying Storm and Echo's development. Charts and graphs covered the walls, showing growth rates, brain activity, and behavioral patterns. "Their intelligence is increasing faster than I thought possible," Lisa explained. "Look at these problem-solving tests." She showed him video recordings of Storm and Echo working through puzzles that would challenge human children. They solved them quickly and seemed to enjoy the mental exercise. "But here's the really interesting part," Lisa continued. "Their social behavior is changing too. Watch this." The video showed Echo comforting Tommy Chen after the boy had scraped his knee. The creature had gently licked the wound clean and then stayed close to Tommy until he felt better. "They're developing empathy," Lisa said. "Not just intelligence, but emotional intelligence. They care about the humans around them." "Is that normal for their species?" Jake asked. "I don't know," Lisa admitted. "We only saw one adult, and it was dying. But I think living with humans is changing how they develop." A loud alarm suddenly filled the lab. Jake recognized the sound immediately. Severe weather warning. "Storm coming in," announced Betty Stone over the colony's communication system. "All personnel to emergency stations. This is going to be a big one." Jake ran outside to coordinate the emergency response. The sky had turned dark green, which on this planet meant high winds and electrical storms were coming. These storms could tear apart buildings and flood the underground tunnels where most of the colony's important equipment was stored. The colonists moved quickly to secure everything that could blow away. But Jake noticed something unusual. Storm and Echo weren't running for shelter like the humans. Instead, they were moving through the colony with purpose, checking on people and helping with the preparations. Storm appeared next to Carl Lewis, who was struggling to move a heavy piece of equipment by himself. "I got it, Storm," Carl said, but the creature ignored him and lifted one end of the machine easily. Together, they moved it to safety in half the time it would have taken Carl alone. Meanwhile, Echo was moving between the human families, making soft sounds and gently nudging people toward the storm shelters. When it found elderly Mrs. Foster having trouble walking, Echo positioned itself so she could lean on its strong back. "They're helping coordinate the evacuation," Jake realized. The storm hit with full force an hour later. Wind screamed around the buildings, and lightning turned the sky into a constant flash of white and green. The humans huddled in the underground shelters, listening to their homes being battered above. But Storm and Echo refused to stay in the shelters. Despite the humans' protests, they went back outside into the storm. "They'll be killed," Amy Foster said, worried. "Maybe not," Lisa said thoughtfully. "Their parent species evolved on this planet. They might know how to handle these storms." For 3 hours, the storm raged. When it finally passed, the colonists emerged to find their settlement damaged, but still standing. Several buildings had lost roofs, and debris was scattered everywhere. But they also found Storm and Echo waiting for them, both creatures glowing faintly with bioluminescent patterns the humans had never seen before. "Look," Tommy Chen pointed. The creatures had done something incredible during the storm. They had somehow guided falling debris away from the most important buildings. The power plant, the medical center, and the main communication tower were all untouched, even though trees and metal sheets were scattered everywhere else. "How did they know which buildings were most important?" Carl asked. "They've been watching us for 6 months," Amy realized. "They learned which places we care about most." More than that, Storm and Echo had positioned themselves during the storm to shield the entrance to the underground shelters. Both creatures showed scratches and bruises from flying debris, but they had protected the places where the humans were hiding. Dr. Su Chen immediately began treating their injuries. The creatures submitted to her care patiently, making soft sounds when she touched sore spots but never trying to pull away. "They risked their lives for us," Jake said quietly. Nina Bell, the security officer, nodded. They could have found safe shelter somewhere else on the planet. Instead, they stayed to protect the colony. "Because this is their home now," Amy added. "We're their family." As the colonists worked together to clean up after the storm, Storm and Echo helped however they could. Storm used its strength to move heavy debris, while Echo seemed to know exactly where to find supplies that had been scattered by the wind. But the most remarkable moment came when Tommy Chen cut his hand on a piece of broken metal. Echo immediately rushed to his side, making distressed sounds until Dr. Chen arrived to treat the wound. "It's okay, Echo," Tommy said, even though his hand was bleeding. "I'm okay." Echo gently touched the bandage with its claw, then looked up at Tommy's face to make sure he was really all right. "They don't just live with us," Lisa observed. "They care about us, really care about us." That evening, as the colony settled down after the long day of repairs, Jake found himself thinking about what they had learned. Storm and Echo weren't just intelligent animals that had adapted to human society. They had become something new, creatures that combined their natural abilities with human values like loyalty and protection. Looking out his window, he could see the two creatures curled up together near the playground where the human children played. Even while sleeping, they had positioned themselves to watch over the colony. Jake made a note in his daily log. "Storm and Echo saved the colony today, not just from the storm, but they showed us something important. They've chosen us as their family, and they'll fight to protect that family. We're not just taking care of alien creatures anymore. We're raising citizens." Outside, Storm opened one eye and looked toward Jake's window, as if it somehow knew it was being watched. The creature made a soft, musical sound that Jake had learned meant contentment. The colony was home to all of them now. A full year had passed since Storm and Echo joined New Haven Colony, and both creatures had grown into impressive beings. They now stood nearly 5 feet tall and moved with the grace of natural predators. But their behavior around humans remained gentle and protective. The morning started like any other. Storm was in the machine shop with Carl Lewis, using its precise claws to adjust delicate equipment that human fingers couldn't reach. Echo worked in the greenhouse with Helen Ross, somehow knowing exactly which plants needed attention before any human could tell. Tommy Chen, now 9 years old, had become especially close to both creatures. They followed him to school each day and seemed to understand that learning was important. Sometimes they even helped Amy Foster teach the younger children about different types of tools and plants. Jake Morrison was reviewing supply reports when the first alarm sounded. But this wasn't a weather warning or equipment failure. This was the alarm that meant hostile ships were approaching the planet. "3 vessels coming in fast," reported Betty Stone from the communications center. "They're not responding to our identification requests." Danny Cole was already at the defense station, but New Haven Colony didn't have much in the way of weapons. They were miners and farmers, not soldiers. "How long until they arrive?" Jake asked. 20 minutes. Maybe less," Betty replied. The colony had emergency procedures for this situation, but they had never expected to actually use them. The plan was simple: hide the valuable equipment and hope the visitors were just looking for supplies instead of trouble. But as the 3 ships landed near the settlement, it became clear that these weren't friendly visitors. Men with weapons. emerged from the ships, wearing the mismatched armor and aggressive expressions of space pirates. "Attention, colonists!" came a loud voice over a speaker system. "This is Captain Rex Murphy of the Free Stars Brigade. We're here for your mining equipment and any valuable supplies. Cooperate and nobody gets hurt." Jake gathered the colony council quickly. "We give them what they want," he said. "Equipment can be replaced. People can't." "What about Storm and Echo?" Amy Foster asked. "Pirates might see them as valuable specimens." Lisa Parker looked worried. "We need to hide them. If word gets out about intelligent alien life, every criminal and scientist in the galaxy will come here." But when they looked around, Storm and Echo were nowhere to be found. "Tommy," Jake called to the boy, "where are Storm and Echo?" "I don't know," Tommy said, looking scared. "They heard the alarm and ran off somewhere. The pirates were already moving through the colony, taking whatever they wanted and pushing around anyone who got in their way." Jake went out to meet with their captain, hoping to negotiate. Captain Murphy was a big man with scars on his face and expensive weapons on his belt. "You've got some nice equipment here, colony man. We'll be taking it all." "Take what you need," Jake said, "but leave our people alone." "That depends on how cooperative you are," Murphy replied with an unpleasant smile. One of the pirates, a thin man with quick eyes, grabbed Amy Foster roughly when she tried to protect some of the children. "Hey, Captain, we got some pretty ones here. Maybe we should take them, too." "Let her go," Danny Cole said, stepping forward. The pirate laughed and pulled out a weapon. "What are you going to do about it, farmer?" That's when Storm appeared, the EA. Creature moved so fast that most people missed it entirely. One moment the pirate was threatening Amy, and the next moment he was on the ground with Storm standing over him. The weapon flew from his hand and landed 20 feet away. But Storm didn't hurt the man. Instead, it made a low sound that somehow conveyed a clear message. "Don't move! What the hell is that thing?" Captain Murphy shouted, reaching for his own weapon. Before he could draw it, Echo appeared behind him. The creature hadn't made a sound, but suddenly it was there. Close enough to touch the captain, but not threatening him directly. "Interesting," said a new voice. "Another pirate. A woman with intelligent eyes and better equipment than the others. Looks like you colonists have been keeping secrets." More pirates moved toward Storm and Echo, but something strange happened. Both creatures seemed to shimmer, and suddenly it was hard to see exactly where they were. They moved like shadows, always just out of clear sight but obviously present. "Natural camouflage," Lisa whispered to Jake. "They inherited it from their species." The pirates were getting nervous. They were used to dealing with helpless farmers, not invisible predators. "Captain," one of them called out, "maybe we should just take the equipment and go." But Captain Murphy was greedy and angry. "Shoot those things. They're probably worth more than all the mining equipment combined." The pirates raised their weapons, but Storm and Echo were ready. What happened next amazed everyone watching. The two creatures moved through the group of armed men like dancers, disabling weapons and knocking people down without seriously injuring anyone. They were fast, strong, and seemed to know exactly how much force to use. When one pirate aimed his weapon at Tommy Chen, Storm appeared between them instantly. The creature grabbed the weapon and crushed it in its claws, then looked the pirate directly in the eyes. The man dropped to his knees, too scared to move. Echo focused on protecting the other colonists, moving them away from danger while keeping the pirates confused and off balance. "They're playing with us," the intelligent female pirate observed. "They could kill us all easily, but they're choosing not to." She was right. Jake could see that Storm and Echo were holding back. They had all the advantages: speed, strength, natural weapons, and camouflage, but they were using just enough force to protect the colonists without seriously harming their attackers. When one pirate surrendered by dropping his weapon and raising his hands, Storm immediately backed away and made a soft sound that seemed to mean good choice. The creature had learned the concept of surrender from watching human behavior. Soon all the pirates except Captain Murphy had given up fighting. They sat on the ground with their hands visible, looking nervous but unharmed. "This is impossible," Murphy said, still trying to aim his weapon at creatures he couldn't clearly see. "They're just animals." Sam Rodriguez, a young colonist who worked in communications, had been watching everything carefully. "No," he said. "They're not animals. They're citizens." "What?" Murphy demanded. "Look at them," Sam continued. "They're not fighting to kill. They're fighting to protect. They understand the difference between pirates and colonists. They know who belongs here and who doesn't." As if to prove his point, Echo appeared next to elderly Mrs. Foster and gently helped her to a safe spot, then returned to watching the pirates. Storm stood near Tommy Chen, close enough to protect him but not so close as to frighten the other. "Children. They're part of our community," Amy Foster said proudly, "and they defend their community." Captain Murphy finally lowered his weapon, realizing he was beaten. "Fine. We'll take what we can carry and leave." "No," Jake said firmly. "You'll take nothing and leave now." "You can't stop us from taking supplies," Murphy argued. Storm stepped forward and made a sound that was clearly a warning. The meaning was obvious. Try to take anything, and the creatures wouldn't be so gentle next time. The pirates gathered their people and retreated to their ships. As they prepared to leave, the intelligent female pirate called out to Jake. "What you have here is special," she said. "Word will get out eventually. Other people will come looking for those creatures. Then we'll deal with that when it happens," Jake replied. "They chose you," the woman said. "That means something. Don't let anyone take that away from you." The pirate ships lifted off and disappeared into space, leaving the colony in peace. Afterward, Storm and Echo moved among the colonists, making soft sounds and gently touching people to make sure everyone was all right. Tommy Chen hugged Storm around the neck, and the big creature made a purring sound that meant happiness. "They could have hurt those pirates badly," Nina Bell observed, "but they chose not to." "Because that's not who they are," Amy said. "We've been raising them with human values. They learned mercy and restraint from us." Jake looked at the two creatures who were now playing with the children as if nothing unusual had happened. "No," he said quietly. "I think they're teaching us something too. They're showing us what we could become. Strong enough to protect what matters, but wise enough to use that strength carefully." Storm looked up at him and made a musical sound that Jake had learned meant agreement. Somehow the creature understood exactly what he meant. The colony had been tested today and they had all passed, humans and aliens together. 3 weeks after the pirate attack, life at New Haven Colony had returned to normal. Storm and Echo continued their daily routines, helping with machinery and agriculture while playing with the children. But Dr. Lisa Parker had noticed something troubling in her long-range sensor readings. "Jake, you need to see this," Lisa called from her lab. Jake Morrison found her staring at data displays that showed massive objects moving through space toward their solar system. The readings were unlike anything in their databases. "What are we looking at?" Jake asked. "Biosignatures," Lisa replied, her voice tense. "Huge ones. At least 3 ships, but they're not made of metal or plastic. They're made of living tissue." Jake felt a chill run down his spine. How big? Each one is the size of a city, Lisa said, and they're heading straight for us. Betty Stone burst into the lab. Jake, we're getting communication signals, but they're not in any human language. It sounds like Storm and Echo, Jake finished. He had heard similar musical tones from the creatures when they were agitated or excited. They found Storm and Echo in the main plaza, both creatures standing perfectly still and staring up at the sky. Their bioluminescent patterns were flashing in complex sequences that the humans had never seen before. They know something's coming, Amy Foster observed. She had brought the children to see what was happening. Tommy Chen approached Storm carefully. What's wrong? He asked. Storm looked down at the boy and made a series of soft sounds, then pointed at the sky. The creature's body language showed anxiety and fear. Echo joined them, pressing close to Storm. Both creatures seemed to be communicating with each other in rapid musical exchanges. They're scared, Tommy said. But not scared for themselves. They're scared for us. Lisa had brought her translation equipment to try to understand what the creatures were saying. After an hour of analysis, she thought she understood some of it. I think they're saying family and test, and something that might mean judgment, she reported to the gathered colonists. Carl Lewis looked worried. Judgment for what? Danny Cole was already thinking like a security officer. What if those ships are coming for Storm and Echo? What if their species wants them back? Or what if they're coming to see what we did with them? Amy suggested. Jake gathered the colony council for an emergency meeting. Storm and Echo refused to leave the plaza, so the humans met outside where the creatures could hear everything. Options? Jake asked. We could evacuate, suggested Betty Stone. Load everyone onto the transport ships and leave the planet. And go where? Rick Turner asked. Those things are faster than anything we have. If they want to find us, they will. Maybe we should try to communicate with them, Lisa suggested. Show them that we're peaceful. Nina Bell shook her head. What if they see us as threats? What if they think we kidnapped Storm and Echo? During the discussion, Storm approached the group and began making urgent sounds. The creature seemed to be trying to tell them something important. It's okay, Storm, Amy said soothingly. We're trying to figure out what to do. But Storm continued its urgent vocalizations, becoming more agitated when the humans didn't understand. Finally, Tommy Chen walked over to Storm. Show us, he said simply. Storm immediately went to the sandy area near the playground and began drawing with its claws. The drawings were crude but clear, pictures of large creatures like the adult they had found dying, and smaller creatures like Storm and Echo. Then Storm drew humans. But in the drawing, the humans and the small creatures were together, while the large creatures were separate. They're trying to tell us about their society, Lisa realized. Echo joined Storm and added to the drawing. It showed the large creatures fighting each other while the humans and small creatures worked together on various tasks. I think I understand, Amy said slowly. Storm and Echo are showing us the difference between their original society and what they've learned here. Jake studied the drawings. They're trying to warn us about something. Storm made an urgent sound and pointed at the sky, then at the drawings of the fighting large creatures. The ones coming aren't friendly, Jake realized. But why would Storm and Echo's own species be hostile? Carl asked. Lisa had been thinking about this. What if Storm and Echo have changed so much that they're no longer acceptable to their original society? What if living with humans has made them different? Different how? Danny asked. Think about how they handled the pirates, Amy said. They could have killed those men easily, but they chose not to. Maybe their species doesn't understand mercy. Echo began drawing again, this time showing large creatures attacking humans while small creatures tried to protect them. They're going to try to defend us, Jake understood. But they're scared. They won't be strong enough. Storm made a sound. That clearly meant agreement, then looked directly at Jake. The creature's expression was pleading. They want our help, Tommy said. Not to fight, but to understand. Understand what? Rick asked. Lisa was studying her sensor data again. The ships will be here in 6 hours. We need to decide what we're going to do. Jake looked around at the faces of his people, humans and aliens alike. Storm and Echo had become family to them, but now that family was about to be tested in ways they had never imagined. We're not running, Jake decided. This is our home. All of our home. So what's the plan? Danny asked. Amy Foster stepped forward. We show them what Storm and Echo have become. We show them that living with humans hasn't made them weak. It's made them better. How do we do that? Carl asked. Storm and Echo exchanged a long series of musical sounds. Then Storm approached Jake and gently touched his forehead, just like the dying adult had done over a year ago. When Storm pulled away, Jake felt different. He could sense the creature's emotions. Fear for the human family, determination to protect them, and something else. Love. They're not just our family, Jake said quietly. We're theirs, and they're going to fight for us. Echo touched Amy's forehead, then moved to each of the other humans. Each person received the same gentle touch and the same emotional connection. What does this mean? Betty asked. Lisa was running scans of the humans who had been touched. Our brain patterns are changing slightly. I think Storm and Echo are sharing some kind of communication ability with us. Why? Nina asked. Storm drew one more picture in the sand. Humans and the small creatures standing together, facing the large creatures. But in this drawing, light connected all the humans and small creatures together. So we can work as one family, Tommy said. So, when the big ones come, they'll see that we belong together. Jake looked up at the sky where the enemy ships were getting closer. Then that's what we'll do. We'll show them that Storm and Echo chose us and we chose them. We'll face this together. The creatures made sounds of approval and moved closer to their human family. The next few hours would determine whether two different species could truly become one people, or whether the old ways would tear them apart forever. But as Jake watched, Storm and Echo playing with the children while keeping alert eyes on the sky, he knew they had already won the most important battle. They had become a real family, and families protected each other. Whatever came from those ships, they would face it together. The three massive bioships descended from the sky like living mountains. Each one was larger than the entire New Haven colony, their surfaces covered in the same crystalline scales as the adult creature that had died over a year ago. As they landed, the ground shook, and the air filled with deep, thrumming sounds. Jake Morrison stood with the other colonists in the main plaza, watching as Storm and Echo became more agitated. Both creatures were making rapid musical sounds to each other, their bioluminescent patterns flashing in sequences the humans had never seen. They're preparing for something, Lisa Parker observed, studying the creature's behavior. The largest bioship opened, and what emerged made everyone understand why Storm and Echo were afraid. 12 adult creatures stepped onto the planet's surface. each one the size of the dying alien they had found a year ago. But these were not dying. These were warriors in perfect condition, their crystal scales gleaming like armor, their claws extended, their eyes glowing with cold intelligence. At the front of the group was a creature even larger than the others, with scars across its face and arms that spoke of countless battles. When it looked at the human settlement, its expression showed nothing but contempt. "That must be their leader," Danny Cole said quietly. He had his weapon ready, though everyone knew it would be useless against creatures like these. Storm and Echo moved forward to meet their own species, but their body language was completely different from the aggressive posture of the adults. Storm and Echo held themselves lower, their claws retracted, their movements careful and non-threatening. The leader of the warriors, who Storm had drawn in the sand as the Apex, made a series of harsh sounds. Even without understanding the language, the humans could tell it was angry. Storm replied with gentle musical tones, but the Apex cut it off with a sharp bark. "They're arguing," Amy Foster realized. "The leader is angry, but Storm is trying to explain something." Echo joined the conversation, moving to stand beside Storm. The two creatures presented a united front, but they were clearly the smaller and weaker party in this confrontation. Tommy Chen started to move towards Storm and Echo, but his mother held him back. "It's too dangerous, Tommy." But the boy had noticed something the adults missed. "Look at their eyes," he said. "Storm and Echo aren't scared anymore. They're protecting us." He was right. Both creatures had positioned themselves between the human colony and the warrior pack. Whatever the conversation was about, Storm and Echo were making it clear that they stood with the humans. The Apex made a sound that was obviously a command. Two of the smaller warriors moved towards Storm and Echo, clearly intending to take them away from the humans. That's when Storm did something unexpected. It moved back toward the humans and made a sound that everyone recognized as no. The warriors stopped, surprised. Apparently, refusing a direct command was not normal behavior for their species. Echo joined Storm, and both creatures began making the same musical sounds they used when playing with human children. They were trying to show the warrior pack something about their relationship with the humans. The Apex made an angry sound and gestured for its warriors to take Storm and Echo by force. "Wait!" Jake Morrison called out, stepping forward. All the alien warriors turned to look at him. Up close, they were even more intimidating. Jake could see the intelligence in their eyes, but also the readiness for violence. "Storm and Echo are family," Jake said clearly, hoping the creatures might understand some human words. "They belong here." The Apex studied Jake for a long moment, then made a series of sounds that seemed to be questions. Storm answered quickly, pointing at Jake, and the other humans while making gentle sounds. "I think Storm is trying to explain about us," Lisa whispered. But the Apex was not interested in explanations. It made a harsh sound and gestured to its warriors again. This time, when the warriors approached Storm and Echo, something remarkable happened. The two creatures didn't run or fight. Instead, they began to glow with bioluminescent patterns that were completely different from anything the humans had seen before. "They're challenging them," Amy realized. "But not to a fight. To something else." The warriors stopped again, clearly confused by this unexpected behavior. Storm made a series of complex sounds, then did something that amazed everyone watching. It walked over to the colony's main power generator, which had been damaged in a recent dust storm, and began to repair it using techniques that combined its natural abilities with human engineering methods. Within minutes, Storm had the generator, running better than it had in weeks. Echo joined the demonstration by going to the greenhouse and quickly identifying and treating several plant diseases that Helen Ross had been struggling with for days. The creatures were showing their own species, how human knowledge had made them more capable, not weaker. But the warrior pack was not impressed. One of the smaller warriors made a dismissive sound and approached the power generator. Using only its claws, it tore the machine apart in seconds. Storm made a sound of distress and immediately began trying to repair the damage, but the warrior knocked it aside. "Hey!" Tommy Chen shouted, breaking free from his mother and running toward Storm. "Don't hurt my friend!" The warrior turned toward Tommy, its claws extended and its eyes glowing with hostility. Storm immediately threw itself between the warrior and the human child, making urgent sounds that clearly meant protect the young. The warrior hesitated, apparently surprised by this behavior. Echo rushed to join Storm, and both creatures stood over Tommy Chen in a defensive posture. The apex watched this interaction carefully, then made a sound that might have been a question. Storm answered with a long series of musical tones, occasionally pointing at different humans. The creature was clearly explaining something important about the colony and its people. "I think Storm is telling them about how we live together," Amy said. Echo added its own sounds to the explanation, and gradually more details emerged. The creatures were describing their daily life with humans, working together, playing with children, protecting the settlement during storms. But the warrior pack seemed unimpressed. In their world, apparently, strength was the only value that mattered. The apex made a decision. It issued a command that caused the other warriors to form a circle around Storm and Echo. It's some kind of test, Lisa realized. They're going to make Storm and Echo prove themselves. "Prove what?" Carl Lewis asked. "That they're still worthy of being part of their species," Amy answered. "Or that they've become something else entirely." The apex approached Storm and Echo and began to glow with threatening bioluminescent patterns. It was clearly issuing a challenge that could only be answered one way. Storm and Echo looked back at their human family, then at each other. They made soft sounds that the humans had learned meant goodbye and love. They think they might not survive this, Jake realized. Tommy Chen broke free from his mother again and ran to Storm and Echo. Before any adult could stop him, he hugged both creatures around their necks. "You don't have to prove anything to them," Tommy said loudly. "We already know who you are. You're our family." The warriors watched in amazement as other human children joined Tommy, surrounding Storm and Echo with hugs and gentle words. Then the adults followed, each person touching the creatures and speaking words of support and love. The apex and its warriors had never seen anything like this. In their society, the strong dominated the weak. But here, the weak were protecting the strong, and the strong were allowing it. Storm and Echo straightened up, their fear replaced by determination. They had something to fight for now. Not just their own survival, but the protection of their chosen family. The test was about to begin, and everyone understood that the outcome would determine the future of both species. The apex stood in the center of the circle formed by its warriors, its massive form radiating authority and ancient power. Storm and Echo faced their species leader, but they were no longer the frightened young creatures that had arrived at New Haven Colony. They stood tall and confident, supported by the love of their human family. The apex made a series of harsh sounds that Storm translated with soft musical tones for the humans. You will be tested. 3 trials: strength, intelligence, honor. Fail any trial, and you will be taken from this place to face judgment. Jake Morrison stepped forward. What kind of judgment? The apex turned its glowing eyes toward Jake and spoke in broken but understandable human words: death, for betraying their nature. A murmur of fear went through the human colonists, but Storm and Echo remained calm. They had made their choice long ago. The trials will test whether living among humans has made them weak, the apex continued, or whether they remain worthy of the name Vorthak. Amy Foster moved closer to Storm and Echo. What if we participated in the trials with them? They're part of our community. We should be tested together. The apex made a sound that might have been laughter, but there was no humor in it. Humans are prey animals. You have no strength, no honor, no purpose except to serve the strong. You're wrong, Tommy Chen said, his young voice clear in the tense air. We saved Storm and Echo when they were babies. We taught them how to be better than just strong. The apex studied the human child with curiosity. Better? There is nothing better than strength. Then let us prove it, Jake said firmly. Include us in the trials. If Storm and Echo fail, we all fail. If they succeed, we all succeed. The other warriors made agitated sounds, clearly unhappy with this suggestion, but the apex seemed intrigued by the idea. Very well, it said finally, but the trials will not be changed for human weakness. You will face the same tests as true Vorthak. The first trial was strength, and it was brutal. The apex designated one of its warriors to fight Storm in single combat. The warrior was larger and more experienced, its crystal scales scarred from countless battles. But Storm had learned something during its time with humans. Fighting wasn't just about being stronger than your opponent. When the combat began, Storm didn't try to overpower the larger warrior. Instead, it used techniques learned from watching Carl Lewis work with machinery, patience, precision, and understanding of how things worked. Storm studied its opponent's movements, looking for patterns and weaknesses. When the warrior charged, with overwhelming force, Storm redirected that force, using the bigger creature's momentum against it. The humans watched in amazement as Storm fought with intelligence rather than pure aggression. But the trial wasn't going well. The warrior was too experienced and too strong. That's when Carl Lewis called out, "Storm, remember the water recycler. Sometimes the problem isn't with the big parts." Storm understood immediately. Instead of trying to defeat the warrior completely, it focused on small, precise attacks that gradually wore down its opponent's ability to fight effectively. The tide of battle slowly turned. The warrior found itself unable to predict Storm's movements or counter its unconventional fighting style. When Storm finally won, it was not through dominance or brutality, but through intelligence and adaptability. The apex made a grudging sound of approval. Acceptable. But strength alone means nothing without intelligence. The second trial tested problem-solving abilities. The apex presented Storm and Echo with a complex puzzle that seemed impossible to solve. A mechanical device that required simultaneous manipulation of 12 different components. Traditional Vorthak approach would be for one individual to solve the puzzle through superior mental ability. But Storm and Echo had learned something different from their human family. We work together, Echo said in its careful human words. The two creatures began collaborating on the puzzle, but they also did something unprecedented. They asked for help from their human family. Lisa Parker provided scientific analysis. Lewis offered mechanical expertise. Helen Ross contributed biological knowledge. Even Tommy Chen helped by spotting patterns that the adults missed. Working as a team, humans and Vorthak together solved the puzzle in half the time it would have taken any individual. The apex and its warriors watched in confusion. This was not how their species operated. Vorthak were solitary hunters who relied on individual strength and intelligence. "This is not the way," one of the warriors protested. "Why not?" Amy Foster asked. "They solved the puzzle. Isn't that what matters?" "It shows weakness," the warrior replied. "Dependence on others." "It shows intelligence," Jake countered. "Using all available resources to achieve the best result." The apex was silent for a long time, studying the mixed group of humans and Vorthak, who had worked together so seamlessly. "The trial is past," it finally announced. "But now comes the test of honor. This will determine whether you are still Vorthak or whether you have become something else entirely." The third trial was the most dangerous. The apex created a situation where Storm and Echo would have to choose between saving their human family and maintaining their standing with their birth species, using advanced technology from their bioships. The apex created the illusion of a massive predator attacking the human settlement. The trial required Storm and Echo to either join their warrior pack in hunting the humans or to defend the humans against their own species. It was a test designed to have no good answer. Either choice would result in the loss of family. But Storm and Echo had learned something from humans that their species had forgotten. Sometimes the best solution was to refuse to accept the choices you were given. Instead of choosing between their birth family and their chosen family, Storm and Echo did something that stunned everyone present. They stepped between the apex and the human colonists. But instead of taking a fighting stance, they laid down their weapons and made themselves vulnerable. "We are Vorthak," Storm said, in careful words that combined their species' musical language with human speech. "But we are also human family. We choose both. We choose to be new." Echo joined Storm on the ground. "We will not fight family to save family. We will protect all family, or we will die trying." The illusion faded, and the apex stared at the two, creatures who had refused to play by the ancient rules. "This is not strength," the apex said, but its voice was uncertain. "Yes, it is," Amy Foster said, kneeling beside Storm and Echo. "It's the strongest thing there is. It's choosing love over fear." One by one, all the humans joined Storm and Echo on the ground, showing that they too refused to accept a choice between families. The apex and its warriors found themselves facing something they had never encountered before: beings who chose. Cooperation over competition, love over dominance, creation over destruction. For the first time in centuries, the apex began to question whether strength was truly the only path to survival. The silence stretched across the plaza as the apex stared down at the humans and Vorthak lying together on the ground. The ancient warrior's scarred face showed confusion and something that might have been the beginning of understanding. "Stand," the apex commanded, but its voice lacked the harsh authority it had carried before. Storm and Echo rose slowly, helping Tommy Chen and the other children to their feet. The unity between the two species was obvious to everyone watching. "In all our history," the apex said slowly, No Vorthak has ever chosen to make themselves vulnerable for others. You have failed the trial of honor as we understand it. Jake. Morrison felt his heart sink, but Storm and Echo remained calm. But, the Apex continued, and there was wonder in its voice. You have shown us something we had forgotten existed. You have shown us what we were before we became only hunters. The other warriors made agitated sounds, clearly uncomfortable with their leader's words. The Apex raised one clawed hand for silence. I am old. I have seen 1,000 battles, conquered countless enemies, proven my strength beyond all doubt. But I have never seen anything like what happened here today. The massive creature approached Storm and Echo, its movements careful and non-threatening for the first time since arriving. Tell me, young ones, the Apex said, what are you now? Are you still Vorthak, or have you become something else? Storm and Echo exchanged one of their musical conversations, then Storm answered, we are both. We are Vorthak, who learned human ways. We are humans who kept Vorthak's strength. We are new. New, the Apex repeated the word thoughtfully. And what would you call this new thing? Echo stepped forward. Family, it said simply. Dr. Lisa Parker had been listening carefully to every exchange. Now she approached the group with her scientific instruments. May I show you something? She asked the Apex. The ancient warrior nodded. Lisa displayed her research data on a portable screen. This is what happened to Storm and Echo's development during their time with us. Their intelligence increased beyond normal Vorthak parameters. Their emotional capacity expanded. Their problem-solving abilities evolved to include cooperation and innovation. She switched to another display. But look at this. Their physical capabilities didn't decrease. If anything, they became stronger because they learned to use their strength more efficiently. The Apex studied the data with growing interest. They became more than they would have been alone. Yes, Lisa confirmed. And the humans in our colony changed too. We became braver, more resourceful, more united. We learned from each other. One of the younger warriors approached hesitantly. Apex, our homeworld is dying. Our constant fighting has destroyed much of what we once had. Maybe what? The Apex asked. Maybe we need to learn new ways too, the warrior finished. Amy Foster stepped forward. You're welcome to stay and see how we live, all of you. The Apex made a sound that might have been laughter. You would invite warriors into your peaceful settlement? We could destroy everything you have built. Storm and Echo could have destroyed us too, Tommy Chen said. But they chose to protect us instead. Maybe you could make the same choice. The ancient warrior looked down at the human child. And if we choose violence instead of protection? Then Storm and Echo will stop you, Tommy said with complete confidence. They're really strong now, and they know how to work together. Storm and Echo moved to stand beside Tommy, their message clear. They would indeed defend their chosen family, if necessary. The Apex studied this display of loyalty and protection. You would fight your own species for these humans? We would fight anyone who tried to hurt our family, Storm replied. Just like you would fight to protect what you care about. But we fight to dominate, the Apex said. You fight to protect. There is a difference. There is, Echo agreed. We learned that difference here. The Apex was quiet for a long time, thinking. Around the plaza, humans and Vorthak waited to see what decision would shape both their futures. Finally, the ancient warrior spoke. The dying one who brought you here was my offspring, my child. When it left to die alone rather than in battle, I thought it had become weak and brought shame to our line." The apex looked at Storm and Echo with new understanding. "But now I see what it truly did. It gave us a gift, a chance to become something better than what we were." The other warriors stirred uneasily, but the apex continued. "Our civilization is indeed dying. We have forgotten how to create, how to grow, how to build. We only know how to fight and take from others." The apex approached Jake Morrison. "You would truly welcome us, even knowing what we are?" Storm and Echo's parent trusted us with the most precious things it had. Jake replied, "Maybe you could learn to trust us too. And maybe we could learn to trust you," the apex said, "to trust that there are other ways to be strong." What followed was a negotiation unlike any in galactic history. The apex and its warriors agreed to establish a permanent outpost near New Haven Colony. They would learn human ways of cooperation and creation, while teaching humans about Vorthak technology and knowledge. Carl Lewis was thrilled to discover that Vorthak bioships were living machines that could be grown and shaped rather than built. Helen Ross found that Vorthak agricultural techniques could make the colony completely self-sufficient. The children of both species played together, learning each other's languages and customs. Tommy Chen became the unofficial ambassador between humans and young Vorthak, teaching them games and showing them how friendship worked. But the most important change was in the Vorthak themselves. Under the guidance of Storm and Echo, they began to remember arts and sciences their species had abandoned in favor of endless warfare. Dr. Lisa Parker made the most remarkable discovery of all. The bioluminescent marks that Storm and Echo's parent had left on the first humans weren't just communication devices. They were genetic modifications that allowed humans and Vorthak to truly understand each other at a biological level. "We're becoming a new species together," she explained to Jake one evening as they watched human and Vorthak children playing in the fading light of the twin suns. "Not replacing what we were, but adding to it." Jake looked out over the expanded settlement, where bioships grew alongside human buildings, where Vorthak and humans worked side by side on projects that neither species could have accomplished alone. Storm and Echo's parent knew this would happen, he realized. It didn't just save its children, it saved both our species. The apex, who had taken the human name Guardian to mark its new role, approached them. The ancient warrior had changed dramatically in the months since arriving. Its aggressive posture had been replaced by curiosity and gentle strength. "The Council of Vorthak Worlds has agreed to send more groups here," Guardian reported. "They want to learn what we have learned." "And the Human Colonial Authority?" Jake asked. "They're sending scientists and diplomats," Lisa said. "Everyone wants to study what we've created here." Guardian made the musical sound that Vorthak used for contentment. "Let them come. What we have built cannot be studied or copied. It can only be experienced." Storm and Echo emerged from the workshop where they had been teaching young Vorthak how to repair human machinery while showing human children how to grow biotools. "Family grows," Echo observed, looking out over the mixed community of humans. "And Vorthak. Family always grows," Storm agreed. Tommy Chen, now almost 11 and serving as the settlement's chief translator, grinned up at his alien friends. "So what do we call ourselves now? We're not just humans anymore, and you're not just Vorthak anymore." Storm and Echo considered this question seriously. They had become the bridge between two civilizations, the first examples of what cooperation could accomplish. "We are the New Haven people," Echo said finally. "All of us together." "The New Haven people," Jake repeated, liking the sound of it. "I think that works." As the twin suns set behind the bioships and human buildings, the New Haven people continued their daily lives. Children of both species learned and played together. Adults collaborated on projects that would have been impossible for either species alone. And in the distance, more ships were arriving, both human and Vorthak, bringing others who wanted to be part of something new. The dying Vorthak that had crashed near their settlement over 2 years ago had given them more than just 2 children to raise. It had given them a future where different species could become one people, where strength and gentleness could coexist, where the best of both worlds could create something better than either world alone. Jake Morrison made his final log entry as simple colony administrator. Tomorrow, he would be the first elected leader of New Haven, representing both humans and Vorthak, in a government that had never existed before. Personal log, day 847 since first contact. Storm and Echo's parent was right to trust us with its children, but we were the ones who received the greatest gift. We learned that family isn't about being the same species or even coming from the same world. Family is about choosing to care for each other, protect each other, and grow together. He looked out his window at Storm and Echo, who were sleeping peacefully near the playground, positioned to watch over all the children of New Haven. "We are all family now." The stars above New Haven shone down on a settlement that had become something unique in the galaxy. A place where 2 species had become one people, where ancient enemies had become eternal family, and